Nasikia kama nimepoteana ama poteza na watu wangu wanakaa huku kwa majuu. What I just try to say in Swahili is I feel like I've drifted away from the Kenyan community here, but I don't know how to say community, so I just filled in what I knew with Swahili. We're gonna get better at this. But let's actually jump into that topic. By the way, change of angle is because I'm using a cheap ring light and it's windy, so the camera would be shaking if I was to have it the other way. But let's get into the topic. The Kenyan community here in America. Let's start there, right? In the last episode, I kind of touched on the three categories you could like fall into, right? You could be born here, came here young, or you could have done a lot of time in Kenya and then came here, whatever. But I also said that a lot of what's it called? Your influence here will be determined on like whether you're immersed within the community or not. Now, personally, I grew up immersed deeply within the Kenyan community here in America. I'm talking about church and outside of church. 90% of the things I did were tied to the Kenyan community. Friends of the church from another church, this and the other, but primarily through the church, right? That's going to be important. Now, growing up here, there were different age groups of people, but I'm talking about early 2000s, and then let's talk about. We're gonna wait for. These are those helicopters that, what's it called? I think they shuttle rich people from Manhattan to, what's it called? To JFK. So those are like private helicopters that go straight to the airport, I'm pretty sure. Or they're police helicopters. Either way, back to the conversation. I grew up here fully immersed within the Kenyan community. And like I said, most of the things I did were related to people that I knew through the church, right? And there were different age groups of people. I remember at the time, like let's say I was 10. I remember that the older youths, what's it called, were always coming around within church. We were always doing things outside of church. Like I would see the people, all the Kenyans that I grew up with, multiple times throughout the week, outside and inside of church or related things. And then, um, as they got older, I'm talking about like, let's say they graduated high school. This is me observing the age group above me, right? Let's say they graduated high school and stuff. This would be like the people I'm talking about now would probably be in like their 30s and stuff. So I was observing them as I was younger and how the community was moving. At that time, a lot of Kenyans weren't leaving the state that I grew up in. So there came a time where you would start seeing people trickle out. This person went to college here, this person moved to this state, just one by one. But in the beginning, I don't remember that a lot of people were leaving. Like a lot of the Kenyans who would get older, they would most of the time stay locally and do things kind of locally, right? Eventually, everybody's just moving, just that. Once they reach that age, and then there came the age group after them. They started going to college to other states very quickly, just dispersing. This now it was the norm. Staying in the state wasn't normal. It was like, okay, go to college somewhere, go here, go there, da da da. I would say I came about within that age group too. Now here's the difference. I still remember though when I was in high school, a lot of the people that at the time would have probably been like 25, 3, 6, and all that, they were still very involved within the church and everything. I would still see them here and there, but some of them drifted, some of them moved, and all that. But then, now that I'm living on my own within New York City, obviously there's not a big Kenyan community here, right? But at the same time, I'm like, I'm so far removed from a local community, like a local group of people that I can see frequently, even if it's not every week. Once in a while, you see this person and you're like, "Oh, what's up? How you doing, my fellow Kenyan?" All that. But like I said, just observing over the last few years, I've slowly just drifted away from them. Now, it's not on purpose, right? I think all that depends on the state that you live in. You could end up living somewhere where there's not a lot of Kenyans. So you're not at fault for not being able to find them. Are there Kenyans in New York City? Absolutely. But a lot of the people here would be like bachelors, people with trying to climb their career, this and the other. They're busy. So you would have to form those individual bonds and all that. Once in a while, you'll find events happening here and there, like a Kenyan event or Kenyan meetup. Sadly, I haven't gone to any of them. I've been busy doing a bunch of other things, but that's no excuse. I could have gone to some of the Kenyan events over here. But I just wanted to throw that question up in the air because who knows? Maybe a lot of the people who are watching this are also within the same age group. Maybe you're in your 20s, right? Do you also feel like you've drifted away? Is that the norm? Is that what's supposed to happen? Are you still tied or tethered to the Kenyan community, local ones? Like I said earlier when I started the conversation, a lot of my ties were church related. Like church was the core of the most of the people I knew. Even if it wasn't my church, it was like a local church of Kenyans somewhere else, right? That I knew them from. Our churches would visit each other and all that. So sometimes I question. I'm like, are there are there large gatherings of Kenyans still happening around? I personally don't live in a state where there's a big majority of them. If I was to name where a bunch of Kenyans are, what's it called, located, I would say back in the day, Boston was like the main hub a lot of people came into. I think, yeah, Boston was like a major entry point. Nowadays, I can say there's a big community, probably still in Boston. Along the East Coast, you'll have Delaware, Maryland, DC, those areas. You'll find big pockets of Kenyans within those communities. You'll have a bunch of Kenyans within Texas. I don't know exactly what part of Texas, but I know that there's a bunch of them there. Um, you also have a bunch of Kenyans in Missouri. I know a bunch of them. You have a big community out in Seattle. Uh, those are the also Atlanta. I know that there's a bunch in Atlanta, but so I went to visit my mom in another state, right, where there's another a bunch of what's it called, Kenyans. I went to a local barbecue or a local like gathering in the park, and this might be one of my birds. I feed these birds all the time. Hey, he came to say what's up to y'all. There's two of them. Oh, they hanging out. Hold on. Y'all gonna see me feed my birds. This is a walnut. But let me get back to the let me get back to the story. I was saying I went to visit my mom in the state that she lives in. I'm not gonna disclose all that, or even the state that I grew up in. I don't know. Is that important? It's probably not important. But I went to a local barbecue or a local day in the park where there was a bunch of Kenyans. That made me realize how much I miss the community, right? Because it's like growing up, you're trying to form your own identity, right? You don't want to be tied to the whole community. You want to go out and form your own, right? But at the same time, the older you get, the more you miss that. So I've just been sitting here thinking, and I'm just like, how many other Kenyans in their 20s, bachelors or whatever, are living on their own in states where they're not plugged into the community? Um, am I unique? Am I lazy for not putting in the effort? Or is this a common thing now? And I'm not on my own. You guys let me know within the comments whether it's my fault for not putting in as much work or whether this is very common now. And there's a bunch of you out there who aren't also plugged into the community. That's pretty much all I had. I feel like I've drifted. I don't think it's good. I would definitely love to plug in. There's not a bunch of them here. In New York City, it's a bunch of bachelors. But you guys let me know. Have you experienced the same thing? If not, still, let me know. Take care. Love y'all. See ya.